Hello everyone, Daniel Kerr here. Welcome to another video from the SnowMetal University. Now here's the deal. I'm going to show you, we're up close and personal. I'm going to show you how I use reference tracks and what I'm looking for when I run them through a spectrum analyzer. Okay, but before we do that, I want you to know that these last few videos, okay, this is the way I got my setup set up. I've got my live here, and it's going through my sound card, and the sound card is actually going directly into this cassette player. So if my voice and the vocals sound a little crispy, that's why, okay? I'm going to be using this cassette player to master. Well, I'm not going to be using it to master, but I'm going to be using it to add some tape compression as I move into mastering my EP that I have coming out on Tech Obsessed Records out of the UK. Now, here is the deal, is that I'm not really sure how to use a tape player for this purpose. I've always used tape, 2.5-inch tape in large reel-to-reel in large studios, okay? And not only that, but I'm not a mastering engineer. So even though we have recorded to tape in the past, recording to tape specifically for the tape compression is kind of strange. Do I compress and then go through the tape? Anyway, I'll talk all about that. Right now I want to talk about referencing tracks, okay? I'm going to use Vaxengo Span. It's a free reference. It's a free spectrum analyzer. So I'm going to run these tracks through the spectrum analyzer, and these are tracks that I really love, that I think are mastered amazingly, and I'm going to run them through. I'm going to show you guys what they look like in the analyzer, and show you what I look for when I'm doing my own mix to try to match the frequencies, make sure, if there's some serious spikes on the spectrum analyzer, I have a terrible room, and I also mix a lot in headphones, so it's very, very valuable for me to be able to use the spectrum analyzer, and I want to show you what these tracks look like, so let's get into it. Okay, so here we are. I've got an instance of Live open, and I have tons of tracks here, and I have all of the reference tracks that I'm going to be using and demonstrating in track 11, and that's because when I open up Span, the graphic interface, I want to be able to see everything that's going on here, and I want to be able to explain it to you. So the tracks that I have is I have the Thrill Seekers Hydra, right? And the reason why I have these tracks picked is because they're all mastered very, very well. And also because it goes from old school, this is probably 10 years or something old, right up to churn, which is pretty new. So I have the Thrill Seekers Hydra, I have Collapsus by Blizzard, I have Seven Lions, Tyven, and then I have Arnie Location and Churn controls, and both of those are both of these are fairly new, I'd say, within the last year. Seven Lions is going to be about 6 years old, 5 or 6 years old, and Blizzard goes back a little further. And Thrill Seeker, here's the interesting thing about the Thrill Seekers is that their track is mastered very quiet. You can see that in here. All right. The tape that I'm using to record my voice and to record this entire demo, by the way, that I mentioned earlier, this is like the third time I've recorded over it, so it might sound really crispy. I want to push this cassette as far as I can go, and I want to try to use that to really get a nice vintage feel when I master my tracks. Okay. So if it's not the sound quality you're used to, yeah, well, too bad. Okay. So I'm going to crack open Span, and I'm going to play the first track, right? And I want you to see the old mastering style. Okay, right here we have basically an EQ, and you're going to see the peaks as it's going, and this is RMS, which basically means that you're not looking at peaks like you're looking at decibels. You're seeing an average that continues to evolve as the music plays. So here we're going to play the Thrill Seekers Hydra. Now listen. You can see they have a high cut right here, completely cut off, okay? That's to keep all the crispiness out. And you can see that we have a pretty good amount of space in the mid highs here, with a pretty good amount of boost here where the snares and stuff are at. And you can see that they use a hollowing out around 400 to 500 hertz, and that's how they get rid of the mud. And you can see that the basses peak around 50 hertz, 55 hertz, okay? So we'll go to the next one. This one's going to be quite a bit louder, right? Now, the Thrill Seekers and Blizzard both are decent trance albums, right? And trance kind of shaped the way for modern electronic mastering in style, and then of course it has completely evolved since then and taken on a lot of hip hop and a lot of other things, even rock, and if you're looking at like synth punk and things like that. So the Blizzard one's going to be a little bit louder. It represents more compression, but let's see how it changes between the Thrill Seekers, which looks like this. See that slope there, and the Blizzard. Okay, it's more even, all right? We still see that high cut right there, right? The bass peaks, right, and the subs are in the 65 range and not in the 55 range, but you can see that there's a shelf right along that mid to mid highs here. And you can see that there's a few transients that are getting through, all right? It's obvious that these are older school mastering engineers, and they really respect their dynamics, okay? Now here's the 7 Lions. This marks a huge difference between even the last two, and is kind of maybe a middle school between what was typical 10 or 15 years ago and what is typical now. Now listen, see the 7 Lions. There's still a cut here. It's very even, right? Sounds very, very good, okay? This mastering engineer is incredible at using the EQ to make sure that there's not a lot of frequencies that are overlapping. He probably puts a spectral analysis on each track or each group of tracks to make sure that nobody is actually fighting for any space. Let's listen again. It's clipping above 0 in the analog domain, right? And that is a symbol that he had it right up to 0 in the digital domain and didn't take into account what was going to happen when we have audio to or digital to analog converters. Now, the next two, these are recent tracks, and these are very, very close to the style of the music that I play. So one thing that changes a lot between this 7 Lions track and these two last tracks is that these two last tracks are in a genre of witch house or wave that makes a huge use, makes large use of sidechain compression, okay? Sidechain compression is such, has made it possible for us to use, it doesn't really matter if a lot of frequencies are fighting for each other. You can have a big washy wall of sound. As soon as that kick drum hits, it's gonna duck, right? Because of the sidechain. So let's listen to Arnie here. Now notice what I said, okay, that high cut is back, as you can see, but you see all this here, all those peaks, look. I think that's stuff that the 7 Lions mastering engineer would never allow to happen. However, because of the sidechain, everything still sounds full. Everything sounds crisp. It doesn't sound muddy at all. And there is also a dip right here, right around 600 hertz, and it's really dipping. And then, of course, the bass is really heavy because that's the style, right? Now listen to the churn. It's even more so. It is very much like this last location track, but it is even more exaggerated. Now watch. See all those transients getting through? Right around 60 hertz, we got a bass boost, and you can see what you're looking for. Look at the bass peak compared to the high peaks. Watch. See the line here? Bass is up here. It's a good 6 decibels lower. All right, Let's try the 7 Lions. See how the highs are as high as the bass peaks, right? The high peaks are huge and it sounds really crisp. This engineer is a better engineer. He had to squeeze loudness out of that and get those highs up. The churn engineer, right, which is probably himself, he was allowed to just really crank the bass because that side chain compression created space in the frequencies, right? So now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to compare my own track with these tracks, okay? So I think what I'm going to use is I'm going to use the 7 Lions track because I think it's a good middle of the road. And in the next video, I'm going to crack open one of my projects and I'm going to place it, place a span on my master channel, right? And the 7 Lions channel as well, and I'm going to A and B go back and forth so that you can see exactly how I use a reference track to try to match up my tracks in the frequency, okay? So everybody be blessed and I'll see you soon.